At my company's year-end party, my elite boss insulted me. Who invited this failure? I was about to leave when my ex turned and said, "She's the one who made you rich, idiot." I raised my glass and said, "And now I'm buying this company." My boss spilled his drink. I stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom, the weight of the past pressing against my chest like a hand squeezing my lungs. The golden chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting off crystal glassware and the expensive jewelry of men and women who had never worked a day in their lives. Laughter and chatter filled the air, an orchestra played softly in the background, and waiters in black and white tuxedos carried silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I took a slow, steady breath and stepped inside. Immediately, eyes turned. Not all at once, but in little ripples, like drops of ink spreading in water. Some people recognized me, whispering to their companions behind their glasses of wine. Others simply glanced my way, dismissing me in the same breath. I ignored them and walked straight to the bar. The bartender, a young man with neatly combed hair, smiled as I approached. "What can I get you?" "Whiskey." "Neat." He nodded and poured me a glass, sliding it across the polished wood. I wrapped my fingers around it, but before I could take a sip, a voice rang out from across the room, sharp and laced with amusement. Who invited this failure? The glass nearly slipped from my hand. I turned, already knowing who it was. Owen Lancaster. Tall, sharp-jawed, and smug as ever, standing near the grand piano with a group of men who all looked like different variations of him, wealthy, arrogant, and drunk on their own self-importance. His glass of whiskey dangled between two fingers, his other hand tucked casually into his pocket. The laughter around him was instant. A few people glanced away uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. I could feel the heat rise in my chest. Not embarrassment, anger. But before I could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "She's the one who made you rich, idiot." My breath caught. I turned and saw him. Alex, my ex-husband. I hadn't seen him in years, and yet he looked almost the same, dark hair a little shorter, shoulders a little broader, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his presence still just as steady, just as infuriatingly sure of himself. The room fell silent. Owen's smirk wavered. "Excuse me?" Alex took a slow sip from his glass, unfazed. "You heard me." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. And then, without hesitation, I raised my own glass and said, "And now I'm buying this company." Owen choked. There was an audible gasp from somewhere in the crowd. A slow ripple of murmurs spread through the room. I watched the blood drain from Owen's face. He blinked at me, as if trying to process the words, then let out a short, breathless laugh. "Bullshit," he said. I tilted my head slightly. "Check your email, Owen." His expression faltered, but he pulled his phone from his pocket, thumbs moving quickly over the screen. I watched his face closely. The way his lips parted slightly, the way his brows knit together, the way his entire body stiffened. The reality was sinking in. I let the silence stretch. Let him feel it. Then I smiled. Surprise. Owen's mouth opened and closed, his throat working as if he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. His eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to refute what was happening. But the board members were already checking their own phones, murmuring amongst themselves. This wasn't just an empty threat. This was real. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "You thought you buried me. Thought you could take everything I built and leave me with nothing. But here's the thing, Owen," I leaned in just a little. "I don't stay down for long." His face twisted in rage. "You conniving little, careful," I cut in smoothly, my smile never wavering. "You're about to be unemployed. I'd choose your last words as CO wisely." His jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. From the corner of my eye, I saw Alex watching, expression unreadable. The room was still silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. No one wanted to be the first to speak, to acknowledge what had just happened. Then, finally, Owen snapped. "You think you've won?" he hissed under his breath. "Do you think this changes anything?" I took a slow sip of my whiskey. "Oh, Owen," I said, my voice almost gentle. "This changes everything." I watched as reality settled in his eyes. The understanding that this was no longer his company. That the people surrounding him, the people who once laughed at his jokes and hung on his every word, were no longer on his side. He swallowed hard. And for the first time in his life, Owen Lancaster had nothing to say. Owen looked like he wanted to throw his glass at the nearest wall. His fingers twitched around it, his knuckles turning white, but he didn't dare move. Not here. Not in front of them. He knew how these people operated, just as I did. Strength and power were illusions, and the second you showed weakness, they tore you apart. And right now, Owen was bleeding in shark-infested waters. I took my time sipping my whiskey, savoring the moment. The room remained eerily silent, everyone waiting for the next move. A familiar voice broke the tension. Well, this is the best entertainment I've had at one of these events in years. I turned to see Richard Calloway, one of the senior board members, grinning like a wolf. He lifted his glass to me in a mock toast. So, do we call you Madam CEO now, or should we wait until the ink dries? A slow chuckle rippled through the crowd. Some people looked amused, others uncomfortable. A few were already inching away from Owen, like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Owen finally found his voice. This isn't over, he growled under his breath. I tilted my head. No, Owen. For you? It really is. His nostrils flared. You're not qualified to run this company. That made me laugh. A real, genuine laugh. Qualified. I repeated. Owen, I built this company. I know its inner workings better than you ever could. While you were busy playing golf with investors, I was making sure we had something worth investing in. And unlike you, I don't need to lie, cheat, or embezzle to make it successful. That last word hit him like a punch to the gut. His eyes flickered with panic. I stepped closer and lowered my voice. Oh, you didn't think I knew? I said softly. All those shady deals? The fake invoices? The offshore accounts? He stiffened. I smiled. I know everything, Owen. And so does the board. For the first time that night, true fear crept into his eyes. He looked around, seeking help, but no one stepped forward. The board members were whispering among themselves, some nodding, others shaking their heads. It didn't take a genius to figure out what they were discussing. Damage control. They were already deciding how to move forward without him. His reign was over, and he knew it. He exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. This is personal for you, isn't it? I didn't bother lying. Oh, absolutely. His lips curled. Bitter much? You tell me. I gestured to the ballroom. I mean, look around, Owen. I walked in as a failure, and now I own everything you thought was yours. His face turned an ugly shade of red. I took another sip of my whiskey, savoring the slow, painful realization dawning on him. And then, just to twist the knife, I said, cheers. His drink slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. For a long moment, no one moved. The shattered glass at Owen's feet might as well have been the remnants of his entire career, and everyone in that room knew it. I could see it in their eyes, the board members exchanging quick, knowing glances, the investors quietly inching away from him, even the younger employees looking uncertain, as if realizing for the first time that the man they once feared wasn't as untouchable as he pretended to be. Owen, however, wasn't going down quietly. He straightened his shoulders, forcing his usual smirk back onto his face, but I saw the way his hands clenched at his sides. You think you're clever, don't you? He said, his voice low and controlled. You think this is some kind of poetic justice? I raised an eyebrow. If the shoe fits. His eyes darkened. You're just a bitter little woman with a grudge. You didn't win because you're smarter. You won because you got lucky. I laughed. Oh, Owen, is that what you tell yourself? That all of this, I gestured around us, was luck. He didn't respond. I leaned in slightly. Tell me, did it feel like luck when you forged my signature to sell my shares? Did it feel like luck when you watched security escort me out of the very company I built? Did it feel like luck when you spread lies to make sure I wouldn't find work anywhere else? The muscle in his jaw twitched. Because to me, Owen, I continued, voice steady, it felt a hell of a lot like betrayal. Silence. No more murmurs, no more forced laughter from the people around us. Just a heavy, suffocating stillness. Then Alex spoke, his tone almost casual. You know, Owen, I always wondered, what kind of idiot cuts off the person responsible for their success? Owen shot him a glare. Stay out of this, Alex. Alex grinned. Oh, I think I'll stay in it. See, when you screwed her over, you didn't just create an enemy, you created a problem. A very smart problem. He tilted his head. And now? Now you're realizing just how big of a mistake that was. Owen turned his glare back to me, but there was something else behind it now. A flicker of doubt. Of fear. Because he knew Alex was right. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about strategy. I had spent the last few years carefully, meticulously, planning my return. Watching from the sidelines, biding my time, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, here I am. Owen wasn't used to losing. He wasn't used to being outplayed. And it was killing him. I smiled, savoring the moment. Tell you what, Owen, I said smoothly, why don't you take a breath? Maybe grab another drink. Oh, wait. I glanced at the shattered glass on the floor. Oops. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and I could practically see the veins in Owen's forehead threatening to burst. He turned sharply to the board members. "You're really going to let this happen?" Richard Calloway, the same board member who had toasted me earlier, stepped forward. "Owen," he said, his voice as smooth as silk, "let's be honest. You brought this on yourself." A few others nodded in agreement. Owen's mouth opened, then closed. He was scrambling now. Drowning. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then I remembered all the times I had begged for a second chance. All the times I had knocked on doors only to be turned away because of the lies he spread about me. And suddenly, I didn't feel bad at all. I took a slow step closer to him, lowering my voice just enough that only he could hear me. "This isn't just about business, Owen," I murmured. "This is about making sure you never do to someone else what you did to me." His breath hitched. And that was when he knew. This wasn't just a loss. Owen's breathing was sharp and uneven, but he was trying desperately to hold himself together. His mind was scrambling, looking for a way out, a way to regain control, but there wasn't one. Not anymore. The power he'd spent years lording over everyone in this room had been stripped from him in a matter of minutes. And now, he was just a man standing in the ruins of his own arrogance. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm under the weight of it. Then he did something that almost made me laugh. He turned to the board, his tone shifting, trying to sound composed, logical. "All right," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll admit I underestimated her. But let's not act on impulse here. We all know the company needs strong leadership, someone with experience handling high-stakes negotiations. Someone who understands how to navigate real business strategies, not just," he waved a hand in my direction, "personal vendettas." I arched my brow. "Interesting. You didn't seem too concerned about the experience when you forced me out." Owen clenched his jaw. "That was different. Was it?" I asked, my voice soft but pointed. His silence was answer enough. One of the other board members, a woman named Denise Langford, sighed, rubbing her temples. "Owen, let's be real here. The company's been bleeding for months. We've had to smooth over too many of your mistakes. The investors have been nervous. The employees are losing faith. And now we find out about," she gestured vaguely, her voice lowering, "the financial discrepancies." Owen stiffened. My smile widened. "So they did know." Denise shook her head. "You've become a liability, Owen." A few others nodded. I watched the realization settle in his face. He was outnumbered, outplayed, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His eyes snapped back to me, pure hatred simmering beneath his controlled expression. "You think you're better than me?" he sneered. I tilted my head, considering. Then I gave him a small, knowing smile. "No," I said. "I know I am." The words hit him harder than any slap could have. His face turned a deep shade of red, his fists clenching at his sides. For a second, I almost thought he was going to lunge at me. But Owen Lancaster was a lot of things: a liar, a thief, a coward, but he wasn't stupid. He knew this wasn't just a battle. It was a war. And he had lost. The weight of it finally settled on his shoulders. I saw it in the way his body sagged just slightly, the way his breath left him in a slow, reluctant exhale. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed toward the exit. The room parted for him, but no one stopped him. No one needed to. Because Owen Lancaster was no longer a threat. He was nothing. As Owen stormed out of the ballroom, I didn't turn to watch him go. I didn't need to. The hush that followed him, the quick, hushed whispers between board members, the way people exhaled as if they had been holding their breath, it told me everything I needed to know. He was finished. A waiter, clearly well-trained in ignoring corporate drama, swept in to clean up the shattered glass at my feet, and I stepped aside to give him room. My whiskey was still in my hand, half full, but I barely noticed it anymore. The rush of adrenaline still thrummed beneath my skin. "Well," Richard Calloway said, his tone light but amused. "That was the most entertaining thing to happen at one of these events in years." A few chuckles rippled through the group, tentative at first, then growing in confidence as people realized Owen was truly gone. Denise Langford stepped forward, her sharp, assessing gaze fixed on me. "That was impressive," she admitted, arms crossed. "I have to say, I didn't think you'd pull it off." I took a sip of my drink. Neither did Owen. Alex, who had been silent up until now, chuckled. "Well, you always did have a flair for making an entrance." I shot him a look. "You didn't exactly warn me you'd be here." He smirked. "Figured I'd add to the suspense." Denise cleared her throat, bringing the attention back to her. "So," she said, cutting to the chase, "what now?" And that was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I had spent years working toward this moment, planning, strategizing, making all the right moves to ensure Owen's downfall. But now that the moment had arrived, I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I turned to face the board, holding their gaze one by one. Some looked intrigued. Others are cautious. A few were still processing the fact that their longtime CEO had just been obliterated in front of them. But none of them doubted what had just happened. I had the power now. I had control. And I wasn't going to waste it. I set my drink down on a nearby tray, squared my shoulders, and said, "We talk business." A flicker of surprise crossed Denise's face. She had expected me to gloat, maybe bask in the moment a little longer. But I wasn't here for celebrations, I was here to take control. Richard Calloway raised an eyebrow, swirling the dark liquid in his glass. Straight to business, then? I met his gaze. Why waste time? The company's been bleeding under Owen's leadership, and the board knows it. The investors are nervous. The employees have lost faith. We need a strategy in place tonight before anyone outside this room gets the chance to panic. Denise nodded slowly, as if reevaluating me. You've been planning this for a long time. I had to. A beat of silence. Then she smirked. Good. Richard let out a low chuckle, then glanced at the rest of the board members. Well, you heard her. Let's talk business. A few of them exchanged uncertain looks, some still caught in the shock of the evening. But one by one, they began to nod. Alex stepped closer, murmuring just for me to hear. You really came prepared for this. I kept my voice just as low. I didn't have the luxury of failing. His eyes flickered with something unreadable, but he didn't argue. Instead, he gestured toward a quieter area near the edge of the ballroom. Then let's give them a reason to believe in you. I turned to the board members and motioned for them to follow. Let's go. As we moved through the room, the whispers swirled around us, executives murmuring to their spouses, employees trying to make sense of what had just happened. Owen was gone, and I was in control. We moved to a secluded lounge area just outside the main ballroom, where the atmosphere was quieter, the clinking of glasses and murmurs fading into the background. The board members followed, some still processing the evening's chaos, others already shifting into business mode. I took a seat, crossing one leg over the other, exuding the confidence I had fought so hard to reclaim. Richard Calloway, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak. All right, he said, setting his drink down. Let's cut to the chase. The company needs immediate stabilization. The press will catch wind of Owen's departure by morning, and the last thing we need is speculation sinking our stock before the dust even settles. Denise leaned forward, nodding. We need to send out a statement tonight. Something firm, reassuring. The investors need to know we have a steady hand at the wheel. She turned to me. What's your plan? I had been waiting for this. First, we get ahead of the media. We release a carefully worded statement about a leadership transition, not a hostile takeover. We make it clear that this is about stability, growth, and a renewed vision. I let my gaze sweep over the board. Second, we schedule an emergency investor meeting within 48 hours. We assure them that the company's direction is intact, that the new leadership will be proactive, and that financial security is our top priority. A few nods. They were listening now. Denise tapped her fingers against the table. And what about Owen? I smiled. Owen is no longer our concern. Richard chuckled. I'd say that's the understatement of the year. I continued. There's something else. We need to address why the company has been failing. The internal leaks, the financial mismanagement, the lack of innovation under Owen's leadership. That's where we regain trust with action. Denise raised an eyebrow. And you're ready to lead that charge? I met her gaze without hesitation. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. A silence stretched between us. Then Richard let out a low whistle, shaking his head. Damn. If Owen had even half of your foresight, he might have stood a chance. Denise smirked. But he didn't. Richard nodded. No, he didn't. And with that, I knew. They were on my side now. The board might have been cautious at first, but business was business. And they had just watched me dismantle a man they once thought untouchable. They knew who the stronger player was. And they were ready to bet on me. I leaned back slightly, exhaling. For the first time in a long time, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. Then I caught Alex watching me, an unreadable expression on his face. What? I asked. He tilted his head, considering. Then, with a small smile, he said, just thinking how different things could have been. I met his gaze, understanding what he wasn't saying out loud. Once upon a time, Alex and I had built something together, before Owen, before betrayal, before everything fell apart. And now, here we were, standing at the end of a war I had fought alone. I gave him a small, knowing smile. Yeah, different. He didn't press further. Denise cleared her throat, bringing us back to the moment. All right, let's get moving. We have a company to salvage. With that, we got to work. By the time I left the meeting, the ballroom was nearly empty. The grand chandeliers still sparkled, but the crowd had thinned, the night winding down. And Owen? Gone. No one had followed him. No one had tried to save him. He had built his empire on arrogance, manipulation, and stolen success. And in the end, he had nothing left. I stepped outside into the cool night air, inhaling deeply. I had done it. I had taken back what was mine, not just my career, but my dignity, my power, my future. Owen once told me I was nothing without him. Tonight, I proved I was everything. And the best part? I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply left him behind. And that was the greatest revenge of all.